In a split second, a glass of water tipped over, and a young man's hand struck a waitress's face, silencing the room. The son of one of America's wealthiest men had just slapped a black server over a simple mistake, and what his father did next left everyone stunned. It was a Friday evening at Lucille, an upscale restaurant in Manhattan known for its exclusivity and clientele of the ultra-rich. The dining room buzzed with the clink of crystal glasses and the hum of privileged conversation. Among the patrons was Ethan Caldwell, the 24-year-old son of billionaire real estate mogul Victor Caldwell. Ethan, dressed in a tailored navy suit, sat at a corner table with three friends, all heirs to their own family fortunes. Their laughter was loud, their demeanor entitled, and their table was a revolving door of expensive wine bottles and half-eaten plates. Across the room, Aisha Thompson, a 29-year-old waitress, moved with the practiced grace of someone who had worked in high-pressure environments for years. Aisha was a single mother, raising her 7-year-old daughter, Maya, in a modest apartment in Brooklyn. She had been at Lucille for 2 years, navigating the demands of wealthy patrons with a calm professionalism that masked the exhaustion of long shifts and longer commutes. Her dark skin gleamed under the soft lighting, and her warm smile was a fixture for regular customers, though she was used to being invisible to those like Ethan. The night had started like any other. Aisha was assigned to Ethan's table, and she approached it with her usual efficiency. She greeted the group, took their orders, and refilled their water glasses with the precision of someone who knew a single misstep could cost her tips, or worse, her job. Ethan barely acknowledged her, his attention fixed on his phone or his friends' banter. His friends, too, treated Aisha like part of the furniture, their requests curt and their tone dismissive. As Aisha reached to refill Ethan's water glass, her hand brushed against the edge of a wine bottle, causing it to wobble. She steadied it quickly, but not before a few drops of water from the pitcher splashed onto Ethan's sleeve. It was a minor spill, barely noticeable, but Ethan's reaction was immediate and explosive. He shoved his chair back, his face contorted with rage. "Are you serious?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the dining room. Heads turned. Aisha froze, her hand still gripping the pitcher. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said, her voice steady but apologetic. "It was an accident. Let me get you a napkin." Ethan didn't wait for the napkin. He stood, towering over Aisha, and before anyone could process what was happening, his hand swung out, striking her across the cheek. The slap echoed in the now silent restaurant. Aisha stumbled back, her hand flying to her face, her eyes wide with shock and pain. The pitcher slipped from her grip, shattering on the floor. Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan's friends stared, mouths agape, while other patrons whispered in disbelief. "You incompetent idiot," Ethan spat, his face red. "Do you know how much this suit costs? More than you'll make in a year." Aisha's hand trembled as she touched her cheek, but she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stood tall, her jaw tight, and said nothing. The restaurant manager, Mr. Hargrove, a wiry man with a penchant for avoiding conflict, rushed over. "Mr. Caldwell, please let's calm down," he said, his voice shaking. He glanced at Aisha, his expression a mix of sympathy and fear. "Aisha, go to the back. Now." Aisha nodded, her eyes locked on the floor as she walked away, her steps measured despite the sting on her face. The dining room buzzed again, but now with murmurs of outrage and curiosity. Ethan sat back down, smirking as he adjusted his cufflinks. His friends laughed nervously, trying to diffuse the tension. "She deserved it," one of them muttered. "Clumsy like that in a place like this?" Word of the incident spread quickly. By the time Aisha reached the break room, her phone was buzzing with texts from coworkers who had witnessed the scene or heard about it from others. "Are you okay?" one read. "That guy's a jerk," said another. Aisha sat on a folding chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She didn't cry, she couldn't afford to. Maya was waiting at home, and Aisha had learned long ago that emotions were a luxury she couldn't indulge in during a shift. She took a deep breath, reapplied her lip gloss, and prepared to return to work. She knew Mr. Hargrove would expect her to finish her shift, incident or no incident. Meanwhile, the news of Ethan's outburst reached Victor Caldwell. Victor was in his penthouse office across town, finalizing a deal for a new commercial property in Dubai. At 58, Victor was a towering figure in New York's elite circles, known for his ruthless business tactics and a personal fortune estimated at $12 billion. His silver hair and piercing blue eyes gave him an air of authority, but those who knew him well described him as a man who valued control above all else, control over his empire, his image, and his only son. Victor's assistant, Claire, knocked on his door, her face pale. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, handing him her phone. A video of the incident, captured by a patron's phone, was already circulating on X. The clip was grainy but unmistakable, Ethan's hand striking Aisha, her stunned expression, and his venomous words afterward. The caption read, "Billionaire's son slaps waitress over spilled water."
Disgusting.
Comments poured in, condemning Ethan and, by extension, Victor for raising such a son. Victor watched the video twice, his face unreadable. He handed the phone back to Claire. "Get Ethan on the phone," he said, his voice low.
Now.
Ethan was still at Lucille, finishing his dessert, when his phone rang. He saw his father's name on the screen and hesitated before answering. "Yeah, Dad," he said, his tone casual. "Get to my office." "Immediately," Victor said. The line went dead. Ethan rolled his eyes, tossed a few $100 bills on the table, and left with his friends, who were now subdued, sensing the gravity of the situation. By the time Ethan arrived at his father's office, the video had garnered thousands of shares on X, with hashtags like #JusticeForAisha and #CaldwellScandal trending. News outlets were starting to pick up the story, and the public's outrage was growing. Victor sat behind his mahogany desk, his hands folded. Ethan walked in, still in his now-stained suit, and dropped into a chair without being asked. "What's the big deal?" Ethan said, crossing his arms. "She spilled water on me. She's lucky I didn't sue her." Victor leaned forward, his eyes cold. "You think this is about a suit?" he said. "You humiliated yourself, our family, and my name in front of the world. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ethan scoffed. "It's just some waitress. Nobody cares." Victor stood, his presence filling the room. "You will care," he said, "because I'm going to make sure you do." What happened next was unlike anything Ethan, or anyone else, expected. Victor didn't issue a public apology or sweep the incident under the rug with a hefty donation, as was his usual approach to family scandals. Instead, he called a press conference the next morning, held in the lobby of his company's headquarters. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing, and the air thick with anticipation. Aisha, who had been contacted by Victor's team late that night, stood off to the side, her expression guarded. She hadn't wanted to come, but Victor's assistant had been insistent, promising it would be worth her time. Victor stepped to the podium, his face somber but resolute. Ethan stood behind him, looking uncomfortable in a plain black shirt and jeans, a stark contrast to his usual designer attire. The crowd quieted as Victor began to speak. "Yesterday, my son, Ethan Caldwell, assaulted a woman named Aisha Thompson while she was doing her job," Victor said, his voice steady. "There is no excuse for his behavior. It was unacceptable, and it will not be tolerated." The room buzzed with whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. Victor continued, "As of today, Ethan is no longer part of Caldwell Enterprises. He has been removed from all company roles and will receive no further financial support from me or my estate. He will face the consequences of his actions, both legally and personally." Ethan's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but Victor silenced him with a look. "Furthermore," Victor said, "I have spoken with Ms. Thompson and offered her a full scholarship for her daughter, Maya, to attend any school of her choosing, as well as a trust fund to ensure her future." Ascertain educational funding is another critical aspect of Victor's response. Aisha, standing quietly in the background, felt her chest tighten at the mention of her daughter's name. Victor's team had done their research, and the gesture was unexpected. Ms. Thompson has also been offered a position at Caldwell Enterprises, should she choose to accept it, to support her professional growth, Victor added. This is not to erase what happened but to acknowledge her dignity and resilience. The press conference was live-streamed, and the internet exploded. Some praised Victor's decisive action, calling it a rare moment of accountability among the elite. Others questioned whether it was a publicity stunt, though Victor's tone and actions suggested otherwise. Legal experts on X speculated that Aisha could pursue a civil lawsuit against Ethan, and the NYPD confirmed they were investigating the incident for possible assault charges. Aisha returned to work that evening, her cheeks still tender, but her resolve unshaken. Her co-workers rallied around her, offering support and sharing their own stories of entitled customers. She hadn't decided whether to accept Victor's offer of a job or the scholarship for Maya. The attention was overwhelming, and she wanted to protect her daughter from the media frenzy. For now, she focused on her routine, picking Maya up from her after-school program and helping her with homework, trying to keep life normal. Ethan, meanwhile, was cut off from his father's wealth. Sources close to the family reported he was staying at a friend's apartment, his credit cards frozen, and his trust fund inaccessible. He issued a brief statement through a lawyer, expressing regret for his actions but stopping short of a full apology. The public's response was unforgiving, with many on X calling for further consequences. Victor's actions didn't end with the press conference. He personally met with Aisha a week later, away from cameras, to apologize on behalf of his family. He asked about Maya's interests and promised to fund her education through college, should Aisha agree. He also committed to funding a local community center in Aisha's neighborhood, a project she had mentioned in passing as a dream for her community. Aisha took time to process everything. She consulted with her mother, who lived nearby, and her best friend, who worked at a legal aid clinic. They urged her to consider legal action but also to weigh Victor's offers carefully. Aisha's primary concern was Maya's future, and she leaned toward accepting the scholarship, though she was wary of being tied to the Caldwells. The job offer was tempting, a stable office position with benefits, but she loved the camaraderie at Lucille and wasn't ready to leave. Months later, the incident remained a topic of discussion. Ethan faced a misdemeanor assault charge, with a court date pending. He was spotted working at a midtown coffee shop, a far cry from his former lifestyle. Aisha, meanwhile, enrolled Maya in a private school with the scholarship funds and began taking night classes in business administration, quietly building a new path forward. Victor's decision reshaped his public image. Some saw him as a father taking a stand, others viewed it as damage control. Regardless, his actions sparked conversations about privilege, accountability, and the treatment of service workers. Aisha, though thrust into the spotlight, remained focused on her daughter and her own goals, determined to move beyond the moment that had changed her life. The story of that night at Lucille lingered, a reminder of how quickly a single action could ripple outward, altering lives and exposing truths about power and responsibility. For Aisha, it was a moment of pain but also of possibility, a chance to secure a better future for her daughter. For Ethan, it was a reckoning, one that stripped away the protections of wealth and forced him to face the world on new terms. And for Victor, it was a public declaration that even family ties could not outweigh the demand for justice.